Alrighty, hello there everybody. My name is James, although now I'm known as Mr. MacArthur, occasionally Mr. Mufasa. That's a funny story. And a year ago, I quit a career in engineering to pursue the honorable pursuit that is teaching. And I thought I would make a video to share my experience. What on earth does it look like completely dropping an entire career to become a teacher of any specialization? I have an itinerary here. Every good teacher is prepared with a lesson plan, and in this video we're going to cover why did I change. I'm going to tell you about the program that I chose, the decisions, the reasons I decided to choose this particular program, in addition to what it actually looks like, what the year looks like being a trainee teacher, or a pren teacher as I tried to coin it unsuccessfully. I'll look at the highs. What are the highs of the experience? And conversely, we're going to go to the depths of despair. What were the lows? What I've learned, what I wish I knew before I got started. And finally, we're going to wrap up the video with some ultimate reflections. And hopefully, you find it either interesting, entertaining, informative, potentially even inspiring. And maybe if you're looking at doing the same, it can be the push that you have needed to dive into the realm of teaching. So, first up on the agenda, why change? So I qualified as a civil engineer. I worked for a tunnel design company. It was actually very fascinating, and boy have I been a very, very, very long way underground in some extremely claustrophobic spaces, wearing some ridiculous looking equipment. Quite funny. Most of my job was actually in an office, however. We were designing the tunnels so that goods could be transported safely, and probably more important, people could be transported through mountains, under oceans, without dying in the masses. Fairly critical. Anyway, most of my job was spent at a desk doing a whole lot of maths and calculations, and I absolutely treasure my engineering qualification. Nothing gives you an understanding of how the world works like engineering, and also, engineers are just professional full-time problem solvers, and so as someone who was diagnosed with ADHD as an adult, problems are like the collective of every single addictive substance for my brain. Absolutely love getting head deep submersed into a good problem. And that's what my qualification was. However, having a profitable engineering firm also comes with a whole lot of bureaucracy and mundane, repetitive tasks. And after a little while of engineering, quite a few years in fact, I decided that I just couldn't sit at a desk looking at the clock gradually tick across the 8.5 hours of the day for the rest of my life. It just wasn't going to cut it. One serendipitous evening, a program came up on the news, and the program basically said, if you have a qualification and you've thought about teaching, well, now you don't have to go back to university. You can spend 1 year in a school-based training program, kind of like an apprenticeship, which is why I tried to coin the term apprentice, where you're paired up with a mentor teacher, you do some little assignments on the side, and you have an occasional lecturer here or there. And at the end of the year, you have, in New Zealand, a diploma in teaching that basically is the license or certificate you need to stand in front of a classroom of little rascals and teach them some subject-specific knowledge. So this program came on, and the coolest thing about this whole process is that I literally just cold emailed 2 local schools, to which both responded, come for a walk around, and then ultimately would happily support you through this program. So that's kind of a bit about why I changed from engineering. I just couldn't see myself sitting at a desk job for the rest of my life. And to be fair, I've done tutoring for a long time, and I thoroughly enjoy the educational relationships you can build with students. They can be very fulfilling, but more on that later. So to talk a bit about the program that I'm doing, as I said, it's in school. And for me, that was super important because I didn't want to go back to university for a whole year to only then find out if teaching was for me. I wanted to rip that band-aid off, be in a school on day dot, because that's just going to affirm it for you, right? You'll know at the end of a couple of weeks, potentially, if this is the environment for you. And obviously when you go into a classroom environment for the first time, I was paired with a very experienced teacher. She was an absolute blessing. She was lovely. I feel very fortunate with the mentor teacher that I had. But you're like this awkward third person in the classroom. The students know how to student, the teacher knows how to teach or be the teacher, and everyone's like, who's this random geezer? And I'm like, hello everybody, my name is James. Hello there. If you have questions, please ask. And the kids are like, bro, I'm not asking you, I'm going to ask the teacher. And so like there is definitely, a teething process for the whole program, but that's honestly nothing. And a few months later, you have your first holidays, you get into the swing of things, you build up relationships with your colleagues. You are admittedly at the bottom of the food chain, but I'll talk about that shortly. And you don't have a full workload, a full classroom load, because you have some assignments, because the assignments are to prepare you for being a teacher alongside the practical experience of being in a classroom with a sageful master. So that's kind of what the program looks like. You have a couple of terms. In this case of New Zealand, it's 4 terms. You get some great holidays along the way. And I stuck with predominantly four classes throughout the majority of the year, which is 0.8 of a normal teacher's workload. I taught the subject math. I'd also be open to teaching physics, but it's best just for your first year to pick a particular subject. The other cool thing that happens throughout the course of the program is you do 2 away practicums. So the first one was 2 weeks at a nearby school, and the second one was 4 weeks at another nearby school. And this is a really valuable experience because school cultures can be drastically varied. So by going to some different schools, you can really find what culture works for you, and that for me is also a really big part of being happy doing what you're doing, is the people that you work with, and then obviously the work that you're doing. So making sure that the school culture fits your personality, who you are. Every teacher is unique and different. That's really important. So doing these away practicums was a big plus. Love them both. And you learn a lot. And if you don't enjoy them, then you have an appreciation for where you were originally. To talk about some of the highs, honestly, they are countless. I have never laughed so much in my entire year. Students are hilarious. Whether or not they're intending to be hilarious is sometimes debatable, but they endlessly crack me up. And I'm constantly having to turn away and cover my face so they can't see how I'm in tears over some of the comedy that they come up with. And, laughing too much can undermine your authority in a classroom, so you got to be a little bit careful about it. But I have laughed endlessly. But that's actually not the high that I wanted to talk about. Just yesterday, I was at school and I've been lucky to do some relief teaching, which is independent teaching. It's my first taste of independent teaching without a mentor teacher in the room. And as I was navigating the school, huge school, 4,000 students, I came across a kid that I'd had this year in one of my more senior classes. And, I hadn't seen him. He's been off studying for his exams for a little bit. And we stopped and, don't get me wrong, sometimes you just, 2 ships passing in the nighttime. Some of the kids will come up, give you a fist bump. Some of them will call you from a distance to steal your attention. But we stopped and we had a bit of a catch-up. I asked him how his exams were, and he said to me that he had just really appreciated having me in the classroom this year. And, for a student to express their gratitude like that, I actually think is quite an adult, mature thing to do. And I think it just, once again, if a kid is going to really genuinely express gratitude to you, you just know it's the most genuine, truthful thing there is. And that for me is just so infinitely fulfillment. It's fulfillment that I never got out of 6 years in engineering, and building these relationships. And he was saying, "Oh, have you secured a job at the school next year? Because I'd love to see you around the campus or even be in your classroom." And that is just so incredibly meaningful. I cannot get over it. So the highs are endless, absolutely endless. One of the other things I love is you really know you've won over students when they will pester you with every question they have. And I just absolutely love it, being in a class of kids who, with math in particular, it has a bit of a bad reputation. Maybe they're a bit nervous. And then once you've got that rapport with them, they're like, "Sir, come, I'm stuck. Please, I need you." And I'm just like, I will answer your summons. I will be there. And you're just running around helping all of them, and they're just so into it, and they're just so vulnerable in that learning experience with you, in terms of just really getting engaged. And when it clicks for them and you see, they love it. Kids want to do well, and kids might say they don't like a subject, but that's just a protective thing, and every kid wants to do well, and so enabling them, so fulfilling. The lows, I've got them written down here. You're the bottom of the food chain. And I think sometimes changing career when you have established yourself, or even coming from a background in engineering, which has some prestige associated with it. You think of yourself as being a little bit high and mighty, and then suddenly you're at the bottom of the food chain and no one knows what qualification you have. All they know is that you have been a teacher for less time than they have. And you kind of have to readjust to that. And that can be challenging. You have to be open to feedback. Everyone's going to share their opinion. Everybody knows the stereotype that teachers are opinionated, and lo and behold, it is true. Teachers are opinionated, and everyone has an opinion about what works and what doesn't. And that can be challenging. And I think a big learning experience for me was just to be like, yes, thank you for the opportunity to learn and improve. I appreciate and I'm grateful for the feedback you are providing me. It's what you say to them. And then in your head, they're not going to be in the classroom once you're qualified, and you can just make of it what you will. And you can ultimately make these decisions, but to the people around you, your colleagues, people who are more experienced, you do have to just put on a front of, I am a humble learner. Please share with me everything you know. And even if you don't agree with it, zip it. If you don't have something nice to say, don't say it. It really is a bit of that. So that can be challenging. Honestly, that's probably the only low that I've really experienced. As for what I've learned this year, quite a lot. Obviously, there's an art to everything, and teaching is no exception. And the first thing that I have learned is to just be the teacher. Once again, it kind of comes back to what I was saying earlier. You walk into a classroom and the kids are like, who's this random geezer on the side of the room just awkwardly loitering? And that's because you don't know how to make heads or tails of the environment. But, once again, as I said earlier, the students know how to student and the teacher knows how to teach. And one of the most important things teachers do is they make students' business their business. So as soon as I got into the habit of just making students' business my business, they assumed that I was a teacher. And so that for me was critical. That was probably the critical mass that I needed to really just feel comfortable in a classroom and making everyone's business my business. Now, I developed an approach. Obviously, in a classroom, there's a myriad of different kids. Some of them are so welcoming and friendly, not very intimidating. And then you start off with the kids that are like that, get to know them, practice making their business your business, and then work your way up the intimidating chain. And as long as you don't come on too strong, most kids are pretty happy at the end of the day to have you there. And I'm also just a little bit courteous to their space. And so, like, if I'm going to go and help them, I'll be, very much get permission. So I'll be like, would you be okay if I help you with that? And just being very conscious of the way you move around the room as a non-legitimized teacher or trainee teacher, I think really just makes that experience way better. Another thing, obviously, I was a bit, I don't have a backbone. I don't rule with an iron rod. I rule with a wet spaghetti noodle. And so I was a bit cautious about maintaining authority in a classroom of kids because I just don't want to shout and yell. And, this year has been brilliant because I've just learned that you don't have to do that. You can be like a gentle barrier that gradually pushes them in the right direction. And then you never feel flustered. It never gets under your skin. You can just be cool, calm, and collected in every moment. And so being able to iron that out for me has just, been probably one of the most magnificent changes I've experienced throughout the course of this year because I'm coming from a perspective of having strong subject-specific knowledge. So, a big part of that is to know your specific behavioral management, like very specific, down to certain scenarios. You know exactly what the response is, how to navigate, some occasionally defiant or obstinate behavior and kind of gently put it in its place until everyone's moving in the same direction, cool, calm, and collected. And just learning those skills really takes the edge out of some of the kids where, originally I would occasionally feel flustered and a little bit out of control, dipping my toe in the water of teaching, and now I don't really have that anymore. So that's been a really positive learning experience. And if you're curious to know more about that, to be fair, let me know in the comments down below and maybe I'll make a video about the best things I've learned for behavioral management as a new teacher. And the last thing is confidence. I'm not a public speaker, although the irony of talking to potentially a few people on YouTube is kind of funny, but you're behind a camera, so it doesn't feel the same way. But for me, I was worried about standing in front of a classroom, and what I've learned is that it's actually not about you. If you're strong or if you have some subject knowledge, as long as you can put the emphasis on the education, the students will focus on the education. They won't focus on you. If you hop in front of a class and don't know what you're talking about, then sure, the critique will go, because they're not going to be focused on what you're saying. They're just going to turn that attention on you. More stressful. But that's what the planning and preparation is for. So if you're planned, prepared, you know what you're going to do in a classroom, they're not going to be focused on you. It's all about having the knowledge, and if you have the knowledge, you don't need the confidence, because it completely shifts the attention. It's just totally on what I'm writing on the whiteboard, and they're happy, they feel confident that I can deliver that information, and so they're like, sweet, he's a teacher. And now to start wrapping everything up, because I've been rambling on for a while, and this is also a common issue as a teacher. I'm going to have to get a timer for my class so that I don't talk the whole time. What I wish I knew, and this one is monumental for me, because when I was in engineering, in here was a black void of cold darkness that spanned the infinite space of our universe. And I would try to fill it with material things like, online retail therapy, or I would sleep procrastinate to get the dopamine from the internet things. And, I just really wasn't content. It was just lacking contentness, and that spanned over many years. And I think that was really challenging, because you try to fill it in all these ways that just aren't genuine. Like, you try to climb the corporate ladder, you run the rat race, you do all of these things, and it just doesn't slap. And, coming into teaching, I knew, you're taking a step down in the salary, a significant one, and it doesn't come with the prestige that engineering has. And, all of this, it can feel like a step down. You tell people you're a teacher and they're like, oh, he's a teacher. You tell people you're an engineer, they're like, wow, you're an engineer. And none of that even matters, because I am literally so fulfilled. I am just happy. I've never before been happy to go to work. And this, now I look forward to every Monday. I cannot wait to have my classes. The kids are just absolutely amazing. I always look forward to seeing them. Even the troublesome little troglodytes, you build some rapport with them, and they're awesome. It's just entertainment, fulfillment, happiness, joy, learning, education. And giving kids with education, equitable education, is such a meaningful thing to do. The world's problems are due to lack of education. And so if you can give that equitably to your students, some of them have tough lives. It's tough being a teenager. And so if you can be a point of stability for them, I can think of no truer purpose. And so what I wish I knew was just how severely fulfilling and content I would feel becoming a teacher. I can really see myself doing it for the rest of my life, and I know that I will be happy doing it. Final reflections. First, never been happier, said that. Second, qualities of a good teacher. First, move around a little bit. It is a bit of, I'm patrolling the class, I'm talking to the different kids. 2, you have to not mind teenagers. And 3, sense of humor. Sense of humor goes a long way. If you have a sense of humor, you can take it's water off a duck's back, water under a bridge, or as some say, water under a duck's bridge. Sense of humor, like teenagers, and moving around, a little bit interactive. No day is the same. Conscious you don't know enough, doesn't matter. The whole point of the training program is that you've got a year in a classroom to learn all the content. And your first year independent, likelihood is that you will have those same classes again. So if you feel like you don't know enough to be a teacher, don't stress. You've got 1 year of being a trainee teacher to figure it all out, and then you've got 40 years of the rest of your life to learn the rest of it. Planning and preparation, you just need to be one lesson ahead of the kids. And as an adult, I think you'll find, or presumably, if you, the viewer of the video, hello, are an adult, I think you'll find it's easier than you think. And last reflection, balance. There's been a few people in my program that have Icarused it, flown too high to the sun, and you get scorched, you get burned. You want to have balance. Do things the smart way, the efficient way, and don't spend more time than you need to. It's been a goal of mine to not take any work home all this year, so I finish at the end of the day a respectable 3 p.m. I know a lot of people will laugh, and then I go home and I have the whole afternoon to just chill out. Something that I also never had in my previous job, because I was trying to create other opportunities because I was unfulfilled. Now I come home, I chill, I check out, and I just prioritize balance. Super important, and I have absolutely loved this year. So that's it for the video. Mr. MacArthur out. Hopefully this has helped to inspire you, educate you as to what becoming a teacher has looked like. Hopefully it's a bit entertaining. Maybe you've taken something a positive way. If you have any questions about the experience, let me know in the comments down below. If you want to be a teacher, couldn't recommend it more. And if you've enjoyed the video, don't forget to smash the like and subscribe buttons. See you in the next one. Peace.